Combat is going to play a massive part within Starfield. As you're traveling across the 1000 planets which will be included, there needs to be activities to do. And one of the best, and the one that's going to be the most action-packed and provide the most entertainment, is combat in itself. So today, we're going to be breaking down absolutely everything. To begin with, let's talk about ground combat. There will be a huge variety of weapons that you'll be able to find within game. These are broken down into 3 separate categories: physical, laser, and mag. Each of them having advantages and disadvantages in terms of ammo, what type of fire rate it has, and what can be done with them. For example, every single weapon within the game can be customized. You can unlock a research facility which you can put as part of one of your outposts. And here, not only are you able to research into weapons, but there's various other things that you can also look into, such as the outpost and any type of supplies that you need, anything that you need on your journey. But today, we're just talking about weapons. With the weapons that you're able to customize, you can spend time as well as resources researching various components. Those components can then be applied to the weapon, which will increase or decrease certain stats depending what it is. You may want a better scope, but then by applying that, yes, you get the scope that you want, but it might be slower for you to aim down sights. So this is one of those things where you need to weigh out the positives with the negatives to get the best loadout for you and your playstyle. However, once you're happy with your weapon of choice that suits your playstyle, this is where we can actually get into the action. There will be loads of activities in game. Of course, we have the main story itself where there will be a lot of exploration, but when going into the vast openness of space, there's also going to be many enemies and you're going to cross their paths at some point. There will be several factions within game and not every single one of them is friendly. For example, you can take a look at the Crimson Fleet. This is a large group of individual pirate captains, all organized under the exact same banner. If you go anywhere near them or their territory, they're going to open fire. So the best thing for you to do is to start firing before they even get a chance. But this is just one faction of many in the game, and dependent on the actions as well as the choices that you'll have within game will depend how these factions will react to your presence. There may be times where conflict just isn't needed because you are on good terms, but in other times, you are going to have to always be armed and ready whenever you're around them. Now, with every single one of these enemies as being part of their factions, it does also mean that this will tie into various other dynamic events. Now, we don't 100% know how in-depth dynamic events will be. Of course, with this, not every single one of them will include combat. Some may just be about finding resources, exploration, maybe even finding some hidden secrets and Easter eggs, but there will be some which do involve conflict. One of which that we do 100% know about for sure is enemy outposts. Now, you may have already heard, and we have spoke about it in other videos, where planets themselves are entirely procedurally generated, except for a few key details. The planet itself is procedurally generated, but various structures, dynamic events, and story elements will be handcrafted. This is so Bethesda can build a massive world like they're doing, but also still have the depth that comes with it. So as you travel to various planets, there will be enemy outposts if there's a reason for there to be an enemy outpost. It makes no sense if there's no resources, no wildlife, and nothing to actually find on a planet for there to then also be an enemy outpost present there. But as long as the rule set says that there will be an enemy outpost, there will be. The difference being that for every single player when going through the game, if they go and select the exact same planet as their friends, the outpost will be at a different location, but ultimately it will still be the same, if not a very similar outpost in itself. Now with this, it's exactly what you may expect. A location which could contain good loot, maybe some hidden Easter eggs, maybe some hidden secrets, extra information, decent weapons, you name it, but it's all behind this fortified outpost. There'll be enemies, various weapons, various defense systems, and you will need to get through them. How you get through them is up to you. You can go in guns blazing, you can try and take a more stealthy approach where you do take out all enemies, but you do it without alerting anyone. And there's also gameplay mechanics for you to hide in vents and crawl around if that outpost does have an opportunity for that to happen. And the goal is to take out everyone whilst collecting any loot that will remain, and there may even be some extra stuff dependent on the outpost itself. But with all of that, conflict, it doesn't just arise based on other enemies, it'll also be there for wildlife. There'll be a lot of wildlife within the game which is hostile. It is a predator and is going to try and kill you. We've also seen that with some wildlife, there's various attacks. We've seen in some of the footage that has already been revealed that some animals, depending what they are, can also have fire damage. And this is just on the quick clips that have been shared so far. There will be a lot more, meaning that as you approach wildlife, you will need to be cautious. You will need to understand what type of attacks they do so that you can best defend yourself against them. Not only do you need to know what's around you in terms of the wildlife or other people, but you also need to understand the planet, because the environment will have an impact on conflict. We've seen clips where you've been on a planet that is extremely cold, and there have been times within the gameplay where the character has shot against barrels containing some sort of liquid, I assume it's water, and it's instantly froze, but that could be used to your advantage, quickly freezing enemies. But that also means that you need to be careful to make sure that that doesn't happen to you. And this is just what you need to deal with when on land, because there's another layer to this once you do finally get into a spaceship. Now, when you first start the game, it's extremely likely that you will only be able to buy presets. Not because customization won't be available, just that it's going to be a very high barrier to entry. You'll need to have a lot of money as well as a lot of resources, and you'll need to understand the various structures and research into them in order to unlock them. This is more of a mid-game to end-game type of activity that you'll go through. But regardless, it comes down to the ships that you have and the stats backing that ship, because not every ship is created equal. And when it does get to customization, you can go and load as many weapons as you want, but if you haven't got enough space for crew, it's going to be difficult for you to have enough people to man those weapons. But depending on what you are actually looking to achieve within game will depend on the stats that you're looking at. Now, just like what we talked about when you do finally land on a planet out in space, there'll also be dynamic events as well as other ships which will just spontaneously attack you. This yet again being based on the factions that they belong to. The Crimson Fleet, they see you, regardless of whether or not it's on land or in space, they are going to start shooting. The cool thing with your spaceship though is that you do have 100% control over your power supply. This is where you can dictate how much power is going to various parts of the spaceship. If you want it to get away quickly or grav drive a much further distance, you can put more power into your engine. But when you get into combat, it'll be a smarter idea to put more power into your weapons. That way you'll be able to fire faster and also inflict more damage on your enemies. There'll also become a point within game where you will be able to board other ships. For this, you will need to unlock skills, which we will talk about in a second, but this will allow you to target specific components of an enemy ship, which will ultimately shut down power. So you can target enemy engines, and upon dealing enough damage, that engine will blow up, it'll be destroyed, and of course with no engine, that ship is not going to go anywhere. That's where you can pull up alongside and you can go through taking out every single enemy that is inside that ship. You may even experience 0G. And with what we spoke about earlier based on the weapon types within the game, depending on the weapon type that you're using, you may have some recoil. Recoil which pushes your full character back. And this can be used in two ways. Firstly, a way for you to just get some distance away from enemies whilst still taking them down, but you can also just go and use this to float around. Maybe get to places that you wouldn't normally be able to get to. Certainly an interesting mechanic. And with everything, and I do mean absolutely everything that we've spoken about within this video, it will be affected by the skills that you unlock. There are certain things that we have spoken about which won't be available unless you unlock skills. And likewise, there are certain skills that will be within the game which will just make certain mechanics a lot better. But what's really cool is that skills in themselves are upgradable. Initially, you'll need to get enough XP in order for you to level up. Upon leveling up, you'll be rewarded with a skill point. That skill point will then unlock the very first rank of that skill, and then the more that you use that skill, the higher that it will rank up, eventually getting to the max rank of rank 4. If you couldn't tell, and to also highlight the obvious, there are a lot of moving parts when it comes to combat, and it is something that will be forever changing based on the weapons that you use, how you customize them, the planets that you visit, the enemies that you are fighting against, whether that be people or different types of wildlife. And all of this will be affected by the skills that you've unlocked and how far you've ranked them up. Now, if you're interested in learning a bit more about these skills, then I highly recommend clicking the next video on screen. We talk about everything that you need to know and how your character will evolve over time. So if you're interested, click that video and we'll be over there to guide you through absolutely everything.